Hey, what's up everyone? Entering Infinity here. Today I'm back with a new video and we're going to talk about the movie we've all been waiting for, Godzilla vs. Kong. Let's get into it. Alright, so Godzilla vs. Kong. This is going to be my spoiler review of the movie, so if you haven't seen the movie yet and you don't want to get spoiled, this is your last warning to click away now. So, I'm going to pretty much kind of give a walkthrough of the movie in terms of what happened and kind of what I felt in general, and then at the end kind of wrap it up, give my overall thoughts, and then talk about kind of the good and the bad, and then kind of wrap things up there. Alright, so it starts off with Kong on Skull Island, and he's kind of just like waking up and chilling there, and we kind of discover that Monarch has built kind of an enclosure around him, like a dome, almost like a Jurassic Park type thing, where he's like encased in there because they didn't want Godzilla to know that he's there because he's, an alpha, and they don't want Godzilla coming to fight him, even though they act like Kong is stronger, but yet they're so afraid of Godzilla coming to fight him. So Kong's in there, and he wakes up, he's like, takes a little shower in the waterfall, he goes and casually like picks up a tree and turns into a spear, and then like launches it, and then it gets stuck in the side of the like dome enclosure that's like fake, and then it kind of like digitally kind of shows you that he's like in a fake enclosure, and he pretty much just shows that he's pissed off that he's in there and he's smart enough to know what they're doing, and he's kind of demonstrating his distaste for being in this enclosure because he just wants to do him and live his life, but they're so afraid of Godzilla that they have to keep him in this thing. And then we get introduced to Kaylee Hoddle's character. She's a little girl who's like a native from the island, and like we saw in the trailer, she's, the only one that Kong liked. She's the last supposedly living member of the tribe that lived on the island. They explain that there was like some kind of bad storm or something, and all the tribal people got killed, except Kong saved Kaylee Hoddle's character, and that's why they have this bond, and she's the only one that he trusts and he likes pretty much. I think he tolerates Rebecca Hall's character to a degree, and he's not going to go out of his way to kill her, but when push comes to shove, really Kaylee Hoddle's character is the only one that he is going to really listen to. So, and just kind of speaking on her, for me, she really stole the show. She was absolutely phenomenal. I was really blown away by her performance. One of the few good performances by humans. So I really enjoyed her, and I kind of wish that they kind of explored that a little more, but they really didn't go that way, and I think it would have served them a lot better if they would have done that, because it did mention that backstory about how about what happened to her and why she's close to Kong, and I feel like that would have served the story much better to have seen that, so that the audience can understand their relationship better, instead of us having to just kind of go along with it. Even though she did such a good job and she sold it so well that it was believable on its own, but I think it would have been even better if we got to see that flashback and got to kind of see him saving her and them kind of like establishing that bond. And that wouldn't have required a whole lot. It could have been like a 2-minute little flashback, and I think it would have gone a long way. So then we go to Godzilla, and he's like on his way to Pensacola, Florida, like on the rampage, and we don't know why. And he starts attacking this Apex facility, and he ends up like completely destroying it because they're like building this new tech down there, and it was like kind of setting him off and provoking him. So he went there to destroy it, and it kind of gives everyone in the public the perception that Godzilla is like now evil and he's like attacking people, but of course that's not the real case, and that's not really what was happening. So that kind of like sets up the plot line where like Godzilla is like the villain of this movie. And then we get to see the CEO of the Apex company, that's the big tech company that ends up building the Mecha Godzilla. He goes to see Alexander Skarsgård's character. Again, like I don't even know their real names in the movie because their characters are just so forgettable, so I try to call them by their real names because I know them better than the actual character names. But they just like show up in his house, him and Dr. Sarazawa's son, which they only really address for a split second when they say his last name, and you're like, oh wow, that's Dr. Sarazawa's son, and you think that it's going to go somewhere or mention him or tie in some way, and there was just zero explanation, and I think that was another huge miss there. But anyway, they bring in Alexander Skarsgård's character, and he's really like this expert on like the Hollow Earth, and he's kind of labeled as this like crazy conspiracy guy that believes in this hollow earth nonsense, but the tech company Apex, they believe it's true, and they believe they have the means for him to get there because they want to harness this energy source that's down there because they don't have enough power to sustain their Mechagodzilla to like fully reach its potential, because they want the humans to be the apex species again. They don't like that, the humans now have to kind of submit to the will of, when are these titans going to attack and just kind of destroy and kill everything. Skarsgård's character is like, all right, I gotta go get Kong, and then he'll be able to like lead the way because somehow he'll know how to get to this power source once we get down there. So they have to bring him to Antarctica, which is where they had discovered like an entrance into the hollow earth. So they needed to transport Kong to Antarctica and kind of lead the way and use the tech from Apex to get them down there to harness this power. So he goes to Skull Island and meets, Rebecca Hall's character. I believe they were old colleagues because he used to work at Monarch, and he tells her the situation, and she pretty much tells him that Kong can't leave where he is because then Godzilla's going to come for him. Again, even though they act like he's so tough, but she's so afraid of Godzilla going after him. But eventually he convinces her that it's something that they need to do, and she agrees to it. So then we get the scene where he's, from the trailer, where he's chained up to that like cargo carrier, and he's like being brought to Antarctica and through the water, and they have him sedated. And then that kind of leads to, that first big fight between Godzilla and Kong, because eventually, Godzilla like senses his presence and goes after him, even though they were like specifically going through like, again, out of their way, out of Godzilla's like, swimming patterns in the water to kind of avoid him at all costs. But Godzilla still sensed him and went after him. So that's when we get that first big fight that we see from the trailer, where they're on that big like aircraft carrier and they're fighting. So I have to say, I felt like that fight was really just an awesome sequence overall. I wish the actual like fight between the two of them was a little bit more, but the build up and kind of everything around it was just, I thought it was really well done. It looked gorgeous visually. All the VFX in this movie looked fantastic. Like there was nothing that looked cheesy or kind of like where you look at it and it's like, that doesn't really look right. Like everything just looked gorgeous. And I love that it took place like, early in the morning, because like the sun was rising and just had that like beautiful color scheme. And then Godzilla coming after him and just like destroying all like the naval ships and like fighter jets in the air. He was like swatting them away with his tail. It was pretty sweet to kind of see Godzilla go at the humans a little bit after they did attack him. So it wasn't like, he was unprovoked. They were lighting him up with bombs and gunfire. So he took out a bunch of their ships, and then Kong was, still restrained and chained up from his hands, his feet, and even at the neck. So he couldn't do anything. So they're like, we have to, unrestrain him to let him fight. And they're like, no, he's just going to get us killed. And they're like, no, he has to protect himself, and that's going to protect us. But before they can make a decision on whether or not they're going to release him, that's when we get the scene where, from the trailer, where Kong kind of, roars into the water. Then Godzilla kind of flies out and like nails the boat capsizes, goes upside down. All the humans on the boat are all like messed up, and the boat's filling with water, and they manage to hit the button and like release him from his restraints. And then they have a little skirmish underwater. Kong kicks away from him, and which was pretty cool to see him kind of how he maneuvered underwater. And he got up to the surface and turned the boat back over, and then he proceeded to kind of get into little skirmishes with Godzilla. Godzilla was like kind of circling around the water, so Kong does this like crazy move where he like jumps from ship to ship to go over to another ship. And after watching it a second time, I was wondering if that was more to keep the fight away from Kaylee Hoddle's character, because he didn't want her to get kind of wrapped up in the fight, or if it was more for what he felt was just maybe a strategical advantage against Godzilla. That was just something I was wondering what the true reason for that was, for him to just jump across those boats to other boats. But it was pretty cool to see. And then that's when we see Godzilla climb on the boat. And then as soon as he gets up, like Kong just throws the haymaker, like hits Godzilla, then Godzilla just bitch slaps him back, and then Kong goes flying, and that was pretty awesome. And then they ended up getting in the water, and then Godzilla's like grabs him and like pulls him underwater, and Kong is about to drown because obviously he can't breathe and he can't get out of Godzilla's holds, and Godzilla's just taking him deeper and deeper. So the humans have to assist, and she tells them to shoot depth charges down there to disorient Godzilla. So the military shoots those depth charges. Somehow that manages to release Kong off camera, and we just see Kong kind of come back up to the surface. And he's like laying down, and he's like, throwing up water because he was like literally drowning, and he's just like out for the count. He's down, and they're worried that Godzilla's gonna come back and finish him off, so they have to like turn off all the electronics and completely power down the boat to kind of make it look like they're surrendering and that like he's dead, so they want Godzilla to leave. And Godzilla like looks up at him, and like I think he could tell that he was like probably not dead because Godzilla's like really smart, but he just like gives him a look and then kind of swims away. So it's pretty much the end of first skirmish, where Godzilla definitely took that W, because Kong had to pretty much play dead to get out of the fight. I mean, there was no situation where Kong was ever taking Godzilla in the water. Like, there was no way that was ever happening. So I'm glad that they did the right thing and had the right result there. So now they're like, the boat's completely powered off, and they're like, we can't turn it back on because then Godzilla is just gonna come back and kill us. So they had to come and like send a fleet of helicopters to like airlift Kong the rest of the way to Antarctica to get to like their little Hollow Earth entrance. And then we got introduced to Brian Tyree Henry's character. He played like this conspiracy theorist with a podcast about the Titans, and he worked for Apex because he was trying to figure out what was going on there. And Millie Bobby Brown listens to his podcast, and she goes and seeks him out because she feels that Godzilla is being provoked, that he would never really just attack humans like that. So she wants to go meet up with him to figure out how they can help Godzilla. So her and her friend, they go on this little mission to go find him, because he's like he stays very well hidden, and they manage to eventually find him, and they meet up with him, and they kind of get like his backstory a little bit, where like his wife died, and he's on his own now, and he just wants to like help Godzilla, and he recognizes her because like of her family's connections to Monarch, so they kind of get along, and they agree to go help Godzilla. So they want to go break into Apex to see what's really going on there, and see what provoked Godzilla into attacking the Pensacola, Florida facility. So then they kind of go out on their little side mission, and they break in and eventually go all the way down, and when there's people like coming around, they had to like jump into this crate, and the crate was full of like skull crawler eggs, which was like pretty crazy. And next thing I know, they're getting like shipped out, and they didn't know what was going on because they were so far underground. And apparently Apex has this underground tunnel that's connected from Florida to Hong Kong that uses like a magnet train type thing that move like 1,000 miles an hour underground to like ship stuff. And they were in this container, so they kind of get launched into Hong Kong through that container, and there was nothing really they could do about that. So like that's kind of like where they're going. And then we kind of go back to Antarctica to see Kong, and they're trying to get him to go into the Hollow Earth. So they use Kaylee Hoddle's character to pretty much be their like emissary to like try to get Kong to do whatever they need him to do. So they're kind of like using her, and she was telling him to like go in there, that's your home and your family's there. And he was hesitant at first, but he was probably like, it's too cold, like I don't want to be here anymore. And so he goes in, and then they get in their like futuristic like spaceship crafts, and they go and they follow him, and they like shoot through this like space-time continuum thing that for anyone prone to seizures, like God bless, because I felt like I was gonna have a seizure in that scene, and I don't even have epilepsy, so I can only imagine the people that are prone to that. But yeah, so they kind of go through that, and then they start free falling into like Hollow Earth, and somehow Kong manages to survive that, which they don't really like explain that at all, because apparently the two gravitational forces are so powerful that it's pretty much going to crush anything. That's why they had to like use that special craft to get down there. But Kong manages to do it perfectly fine, and not only that, he lands from like free falling from the sky, like, and manages to do that and not take any damage or get killed or anything. So then Kong gets attacked by a war bat, which had a pretty cool design. There was like two of them, I think, and then he kills one pretty easily, then the other one gets him, and it's about to kill him through suffocation, and then again the humans have to come and save him, which is the recurring theme throughout this movie, is that Kong had to constantly be saved by humans. So then their spaceship that also apparently has like military grade like missiles on it, so they like light up the warbat, and it kind of like releases Kong enough for Kong to take it and kill it. And it was like pretty savage. He like smashes its head in and like rips it off and like drinks the blood out of the skull. Like, it was pretty sweet to see like how savage he was. And then somehow he magically knows exactly where this like power source is that they need, and they kind of watch him kind of go through this like weird planet type thing in the Hollow Earth. It was like very reminiscent of Avatar, in terms of like the visuals, except here like didn't have like the floating mountains, because like it was actually the underside of Earth's surface, so it was like upside down mountains, so it was like pretty cool visually to kind of see that, and it kind of made more sense than like Avatar's floating mountains that were floating for no reason. So visually like it looked really nice, and it was like really cool to see that and all the different kind of creatures and things down there. But it also made no sense how there was like sunlight down there, because that was a thing apparently. In the middle of the earth there's sunlight somehow, but I guess we're just supposed to go with that. And eventually he finds his way to this like temple that was like very human made type of temple. So I'm wondering how, what kind of ancient humans were down there and how did they even get there. They like built this temple and it like harness this energy source. So this is where Kong finds his axe, and he pretty much sits down on this throne of like this empty temple for like 4 seconds, and then the CEO's daughter from Apex, she turns on them and she goes and she starts stealing the energy source, and that part also made like absolutely no sense. Like she takes a sample of this energy, and then in 2 minutes of analyzing it, they can magically recreate it infinitely like on the Earth's surface. So like that part didn't really make any sense, but that's when they were able to finally get enough power. Then Kong gets pissed that she did that, and he, was charging up his axe in that power from the ground. That was like very similar to Godzilla's like energy. And that creates like all the bats in the temple to like these like bat bird creatures to like start flying around attacking when Kong got all mad and made a lot of noise. So it kills like pretty much all the humans except for, the 3 main characters in Kaylee Hoddle, Rebecca Hall, and Alexander Skarsgård's characters. So they're pretty much the only ones that survive that. And then, back up on the surface, Godzilla is on his way to Hong Kong because he senses a Mega Godzilla being turned on again. So he's on his way there, and then when he gets there, he starts like atomic breathing into the ground. And based on the trailer, I thought that was because he was going after Mecha Godzilla underground, but apparently it was to go after Kong as well, because not only was Mecha Godzilla there, but apparently that was directly, conveniently under the surface where Kong was in the hollow earth. So his atomic breath blasted all the way through down there, which was pretty ridiculous. But he blasts a hole all the way down to exactly where Kong is, and then they're kind of like roaring up to each other and up and down. I don't even know what was what anymore, because the hollow earth was so confusing in terms of what was up and what was down because of the gravity, and they kept like jumping up and then it would flip. So it was like very disorienting. So that pretty much is a way for Kong to just kind of like climb back up now, which was like just very weird. And Kong just like makes his way up there like it's nothing, even though he's like in the middle of the earth. So he climbs out with the axe, the humans like fly out in their little spaceship, and then the fight in Hong Kong ensues, and that fight was just so cool. He was like moving with like a very low center of gravity, and it almost reminded me of the Spinosaurus from Jurassic Park 3, the way like his like back scales were kind of up and how he was like hunched down. It was like pretty interesting to see him like that and kind of like see them kind of like brawling and going at it, and they had to like keep coming up with like different plot devices as to like why like Godzilla couldn't hit him with the atomic breath, because obviously that would have just killed him in like 2 seconds. They go at it. I mean, Kong does a good job of like getting in close because he's a better close range fighter, and that's kind of where he has the advantage over Godzilla. So he's trying to like stop him from using his atomic breath and constantly like moving his head, and he even went for his like infamous move where he like grabs his jaw and tries to like break it in half, but Godzilla like shakes him off and like swats him with his tail, and they just like go at it. Eventually he like springs himself up, and that's when we see that famous scene from the trailer where he comes down with the axe, and despite all that and nailing Godzilla in the head with the axe, it still like doesn't even do anything. They try to pretend like that's Kong winning that round because they have Alexander Skarsgård's characters like, oh, I guess round 2 goes to Kong, and I'm like, no, it didn't, because that was like just one big fight. Like that wasn't the end of a fight. Godzilla wasn't out. When he made connection with Godzilla, it created a blast, and Kong went flying through like multiple buildings and got messed up. Godzilla just kind of like flew back into a building, but he never even like was like unconscious or anything. He just shook it off like it was nothing, and they kept fighting again. So I wouldn't say that round 2 went to him. Like there was only 2 fights, and that was just one small part of the overall fight. So they continue, and Godzilla eventually overpowers him because they can only throw in so many plot devices to save Kong. So yeah, so eventually, Godzilla like takes him out, and Godzilla has Kong pinned on the ground with his foot like on his chest, where he could have easily just like crushed his like lungs in and just stepped through him, or he could have just blasted him with an atomic breath. But Godzilla was nice enough to like not actually kill him. So he was pretty much just like, dude, stop, know your place, you're not stronger than me, give up. And Kong was just like out of it at that point, because he just got wrecked. And so Godzilla kind of like starts, walking away. Then that's when like Mecha Godzilla comes out, and then he starts attacking Godzilla. But at this point, Godzilla has had like multiple fights, and he was like exhausted, so he wasn't at full strength at this point. And this Mecha Godzilla was like so OP. And yeah, so Mecha Godzilla pretty much kicked the shit out of Godzilla, because he was just so tired and OP. But props to Godzilla, man. He took so many hits from Mecha Godzilla, and he was still kept on ticking regardless of how much he got hit and dragged through buildings and like wrecked like all over Hong Kong. Meanwhile, Kong is like down and out. He's like literally about to die. Humans have to save him again, so they get their little spaceship and they use it to pretty much jumpstart his heart. Like it's like a defibrillator, so it kind of restarts his heart and it helps him like magically get back to normal. Then Kong jumps up, and then Kaylee Hoddle tells him with like sign language that Godzilla is not the enemy, Mecha Godzilla the enemy, like go help him pretty much and be careful. So then he goes and he gets all fired up, and Kong goes and joins the fight. And then that's when we get to see the team up of Kong and Godzilla versus Mecha Godzilla. So that was really awesome to kind of see them tag teaming to fight. But Mecha Godzilla just had so many kind of tricks, different things up its sleeve, that it was able to kind of like fight both of them. Like even if it grabbed both of them, it would have like missiles like in its chest that would like shoot out and like blow them up, and like the tail, like everything about it was just like a crazy weapon. They were doing their tag team moves, but like Mechagodzilla was still holding his own, and the humans were figuring out how to like stop it, because up until that point it was being piloted by Dr. Serizawa's son through like a Pacific Rim type Jaeger situation, where he wore a helmet and he was like controlling it with his mind. He was controlling it through base inside Ghidorah's skull that was using its like psychic power to like power Mechagodzilla, which was just like another really weird thing in the movie. And once it got all the extra power from Hollow Earth, he kind of lost control of it, and it pretty much had a mind of its own, and Mechagodzilla just kind of went rogue. And that's when I was trying to understand whether or not it was just kind of like an autonomous AI system that was running it, or if it was actually like Ghidorah's mind that was controlling it. Because at first I thought it was Ghidorah's mind, and I thought that was pretty cool, having him kind of like exact revenge on Godzilla, using a Mechagodzilla like by controlling it with its mind. Like I thought that would be kind of cool, but they never ended up explaining it, so it was just kind of all for nothing in the end. But eventually, back to the fight, we get to see them they were kind of getting beat a bit with their tag team, and then Godzilla was down, Kong was like holding him off, and then Godzilla used his atomic breath to blast the axe that's in Kong's hand, and then Kong uses that powered up axe. Now it wasn't really dealing damage, so now he just like slices it to pieces, and he just like chops it limb from limb and completely decimates Mechagodzilla. Then eventually like rips his head off, and he like holds the head with like the spine like hanging out. It was really sweet to see that. So that was pretty much the end of that fight. And then Godzilla kind of gets up, and they kind of like square off again, like they're gonna go at it, and all the humans are like, oh shit, like they're gonna fight again, we thought they were done. This Kong starts like roaring, and like Godzilla starts roaring. Then like the look in Kong's face, he's just like, bro, like I don't want to fight anymore. And Godzilla's like, fine. He's like, just know your place, like I'll let you live, but know your place, like I'm the god, I'm the alpha. And then he kind of just like turns and leaves, and then that's pretty much where it ends. Then they cut to a new Monarch outpost in the Hollow Earth where Kong now lives. And that was pretty much it. Then that's where the movie kind of wraps up. So that's pretty much the movie overall in a nutshell. Alright, so now that we've kind of gone over the plot of the movie, now I want to talk about, what I think was the good, what I think was the bad, and what I think they should have done differently, and then we'll kind of wrap everything up. So in terms of the good, I think for starters, one of the best aspects of the movie was the VFX. I thought all the visuals looked, really gorgeous, and there was really no complaints on my end. Like everything looked really nice, and there was nothing that was really cringy or kind of looked off. Like everything looked really stunning visually, and I was really happy about that, because the last thing you want in one of these movies is for things to not look good, and that's one thing that no one could really complain about with this movie, because the visuals were really gorgeous. And along those lines, I feel like they did a phenomenal job capturing like the facial expressions of the Titans, especially with Kong. They really did such a good job at animating his facial expressions, and it would zoom in, and like you would just really feel like exactly what Kong was feeling, because it did such a good job capturing the emotions for these titans that don't even speak or kind of really express themselves other than Kong with the sign language. But yeah, I just really thought they did a phenomenal job in that. Something that really stood out to me. The next good thing was the fights. I thought they did a phenomenal job with the fights and kind of all the visuals surrounding the fights. From the first fight when they're fighting in the middle of the ocean, I thought that looked absolutely gorgeous. I love that it took place like in the morning with the sun rising and the water. It just looked so cool, and you know, all the fights were just so well choreographed and kind of done in different styles that we haven't seen before, because you know, if they keep repeating the same thing, you know, it could get old after a while. But I like that they're still coming up with different ways for not only like the locations of where they fight, but also like how they actually fight and kind of their fighting styles, their movements, like all the little nuances. I thought they did a really good job with that. So we got to see Godzilla. He was a lot more nimble and a lot more fast in this one. We got to see him like sprint. He was like crouching down. He reminded me of like a Spinosaurus from Jurassic Park 3, when he would have like a low center of gravity and he'd be like going after Kong, and this with the spikes in the back. Like it looked really cool, and he was like bobbing and weaving and like, you know, just really moving well, and Kong was like kind of bouncing around across the buildings like he was in the jungle. Like they did a really cool job with that to keep it fresh and interesting, and I really appreciated that. You know, in terms of the humans and their acting performances, I think there was really 4 of them that really stood out to me. For me, Kaylee Hoddle just stole the show. Like she was really just kind of on a whole nother level, and I loved every single moment we got with her, and I think she just totally nailed it and knocked it out of the park. So totally props to her. And fun fact that she is actually deaf in real life, which I found to be really interesting and surprising to me, because I thought it was just an actress pretending to be somebody that was deaf. So I thought that was really interesting that she actually is deaf, for people that don't actually know that. But you know, she totally stole the show for me, and she did such a good job. And I particularly love the one scene where they're on the aircraft carrier and she goes out to Kong in the middle of the rainstorm, and they kind of focus in on Kong, and he was like kind of flipping out, and it was like dead silent because it was supposed to be from her perspective as like a deaf child. And I just thought that was like really interesting to kind of be in that insane of a world with titans like running around and could like kill you at any second, and she's deaf, and like you just kind of get it from her perspective, where like this massive creature is like making all this noise and kind of going crazy, and like she just hears nothing. So I thought that was a really nice touch to kind of like pull you into the moment, and I thought she was fantastic. Aside from her, the other 3 I would say were Millie Bobby Brown, Brian Tyree Henry, and Rebecca Hall. I think those are the other 3 standout performances for me. I thought they were, you know, enjoyable characters. They put on really good performances, and I just personally felt like every other character in the movie was just pretty much useless and unnecessary and didn't really do much of anything for me. And honestly, I can't even remember their names, or you know, they could have been really played by anyone, and I wasn't really impressed with really anybody else in terms of acting performances. So then in terms of the bad, unfortunately I wish there was nothing bad to say about this movie, because I love Godzilla movies so much, but unfortunately there was some bad things that I have to address from this movie. The number one worst part of this movie for me was the whole plot around the Hollow Earth. That just, for me, just totally jumped the shark, and the movie kind of just lost all credibility at that point, and I really did not like how they handled that. I feel like the director just didn't really know what to do with Kong, and he just kind of came up with this asinine side mission to have a monkey kind of fly through the space-time continuum through like an electromagnetic field to go through the center of the earth for like pretty much no reason. And I just really hated that plot line, and for me it kind of just like broke the universe. I know there's a lot we have to go with, you know, jumping into this kind of world of titans and kaijus and all kinds of fantastical things, but that for me was just so unnecessary, and I just really hated that plot line. For me, it just, there was really no reason for it, and they didn't have to try to do that, and I feel like they could have just done other things that would have been simpler and kind of kept the world building intact, instead of kind of like breaking the formula and kind of taking it to a place that I really don't feel like it paid off. The next bad thing about it was, like I said before, pretty much every other actor than the 4 that I mentioned, they were just really unnecessary and didn't really add any value to the movie. The most surprising for me was Alexander Skarsgård. I am a fan of his. I think he's a fantastic actor, and I just feel like he did absolutely nothing for me in this movie, and his character was just really stupid and useless. And if you wanted to have kind of someone to bring in that plot line that he kind of did, I feel like they probably should have just merged that into Rebecca Hall's character and just had her have knowledge of the Hollow Earth, and just kind of let her and Kaylee Hoddle kind of just handle that. And I feel like he was just really useless, and I was pretty shocked to see that he was credited in IMDb as like the top actor in the movie, considering how insignificant I felt like his character character was and didn't really do anything for me at all. You know, I'm typically not one to complain about the humans, because pretty much every Godzilla movie I see, people are always complaining that there's too many humans and like they don't really do anything. And I had to disagree with, you know, all the previous Godzilla movies, because I really did enjoy, for the most part, all the humans that were in those movies. But for me, this one, they just really, really fell flat. And I do have to kind of agree with that criticism of people, unfortunately. The next thing I didn't like was all the futuristic tech in the movie. I just felt like it was such an ass pull, because in every other one of the movies leading up to this, they never had tech that was this advanced. It was pretty much the same as the modern technology that we have in the present, and all of a sudden they have all this futuristic alien technology from like 1,000 years into the future, and it was like, where did all this come from? There's really no explanation, and it was just so unnecessary. And I felt like a lot of it had to do with filling that plot of Kong going to the Hollow Earth, that they needed those special spaceships to like get down there, and like I feel like that was just so unnecessary, and I wish that they would have just redid all of that and kind of removed all of that tech that just kind of really didn't make any sense. For me, the only thing that would have been considered like a futuristic tech from the movie should have been like Mechagodzilla himself, because that's really the only thing that I would have really just been believable as like, oh, it's some kind of futuristic, you know, military weapon. Like, okay, like I'll go with that. But there was like just so much tech in that movie that was just so out of place, and you know, and it just didn't feel right, and it just kind of came out of nowhere, because not that much time has passed from the other movies, that I just kind of felt like where did this even come from, and why did they feel it was necessary to kind of include that. And the next thing I didn't like was how they incorporated Ghidorah's skull into the movie. I was really excited at the post-credit scenes for King of Monsters, where they kind of recovered the one head that was severed in the ocean, and I was really hoping that they would eventually pay it off with a Mecha King Ghidorah plotline in the future, because that would be so awesome to get that from the original movies. But the way they kind of incorporated it here, as like the skull has this like psychic powers that they tap into to like copy Pacific Rim with like the Jaeger piloting that helped them pilot the Mechagodzilla. Like for me, it was just, again, just another kind of jumping the shark moment, and just so unnecessary. They have such futuristic technology, like why would they need, you know, to do that, to pilot Mechagodzilla? Like they could have just either had a person in there or just had a technology remote into it. I mean, it just really didn't make sense, because I feel like the current technology in the present day could figure out how to do that, let alone the futuristic tech that they had. I don't understand why they would have needed that. Along those lines, in terms of things that were unnecessary, it's like, why did they have to go to the Hollow Earth to get that power source when they already had ridiculous futuristic power sources already where they were on Earth? I mean, like they said, one of their little spaceships had enough energy to power Las Vegas for a week. I mean, that's something that's so far beyond our current technology that if they already had access to something that powerful, surely they could have done something to power Mechagodzilla. I mean, it just seemed like just such a reach for me, and I just really didn't like how they did that. I just wish they would have just not even had the skull of Ghidorah at all in the movie, just so that we could eventually pay it off with Mecha King Ghidorah. But now they kind of just like threw that out the window, so I was kind of disappointed with that, because it was just so unnecessary. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. So in terms of what I would have preferred to see differently, I would have just really liked to see them bridge the King of Monsters ending to the current place in the timeline, because I feel like the way that movie ended, it kind of just left you with so many questions as to like, how did we get to where we are now? And I feel like they should have just spent like a very small amount of time at the very least just addressing kind of like where everything kind of settled back down, because at the end of that movie, like pretty much all the kaijus, or so many of them around the world, were awake and had just been rampaging around after being dormant for like thousands of years, and now all of a sudden we're back to present day, and like everything's just kind of back to normal, and Godzilla is just kind of chilling in the water. But it's like, what happened to all the rest of the kaiju? Like, you know, I just wish they would have just addressed that in some way, because like to just not say anything was just like kind of weird. It would have been better if they would have incorporated that into the beginning of this one with how they introduced Kong, because I would have loved to see how Kong was reacting during the King of Monsters movie when Ghidorah had kind of like defeated Godzilla for the first time, and then they had pretty much blown up Godzilla with the oxygen destroyer, and Ghidorah was like screeching around the world and like awakening all the Titans. I would have loved to seen like Kong like hear that and like get really pissed and start going psycho like within like that Monarch facility, and maybe even possibly have like a Titan crossover into Skull Island and have him like maybe have a little skirmish in the beginning. I feel like that would have been so much better, and it would have like tied all the stories together, and it would have been so much better than like what they did, instead of just have him like on the island just just chilling and like throwing trees into the dome like he's in the Hunger Games too. Like it was just kind of whatever, but I feel like that would have been done really nicely if they could have pulled that off to tie in the other movies together and kind of see what Kong was doing during King of Monsters. I think that would have been really cool. And maybe even had a cameo from like maybe Rodan or like one of the other ones, kind of have him like have a little fight, because Kong has never really had a legitimate fight against like another Titan before. All he's really fought are like skull crawlers and like T-Rexes and like other stupid shit that's on his little island. So it would have been cool to like see him like, you know, maybe do something else. Another thing that I feel like was a missed opportunity that they should have done was expand more on Kaylee Hoddle's relationship with Kong. I think, you know, her having such a standout performance and being such a great character that was added, and they kind of even reference her backstory with Kong, and I would have loved to have a flashback of a few minutes just to see that that storm that took out all the tribal people and Kong saving her and kind of developing that bond, because she did such a good job selling it without us even seeing that. I feel like it would have been that much better if we could have actually got to see their like kind of initial bonding experience to kind of get us where we are now. So that's another thing that I think they could have added. And if they would have just cut out the whole plot line regarding the Hollow Earth, I think they could have put what I'm mentioning in there, and it would have just been so much better than kind of what we ended up getting in the end. And yeah, and then the next thing I wish they would have done differently is I wish they would have explored more with Dr. Serizawa's son. You know, he was one of my favorite characters in the previous Godzilla movies, and then he got, you know, killed off in the last one. And I was really excited to hear that his son was going to be, you know, in this movie, and I thought that he would play a much bigger role, and that we would kind of get, you know, more of like his motivations and like maybe, you know, talk about his father or literally anything. But they did absolutely nothing with him. I mean, the only reason how you knew he was even his son is because they said it in like one line that his last name was Serizawa. So like I thought that was just a huge missed opportunity for them that they could have capitalized on, and it just felt like they just stretched themselves too thin with all the characters and all the plot lines that were just really unnecessary. And if they would have just honed in on what was working and just kept it, you know, the plot more simple, like it didn't really have to be as crazy as it was. Again, it just felt like the director just didn't know what to do with Kong, and then it just kind of like set them on these tangents and kind of like set them in all these directions that it didn't need to go in, and it kind of lost the plot of the movie. So those are just some of the things that I think would have been better. But overall, in conclusion, I had a lot of fun with the movie. I was so happy to be back in theaters. I got to see it in IMAX for the first time, being back in theaters since the pandemic. Then I also watched it a second time on HBO Max, which was nothing short of a disaster. You know, HBO Max kept crashing and freezing, I guess because so many people were watching it, and I know I wasn't the only one experiencing it. So that was hugely disappointing for me and hugely disappointing for HBO Max in general, since that's like a new service that they're trying to sell to people. And, you know, the first big blockbuster movie to come out, you can't even, you know, manage your servers to handle the people watching it. I think it's kind of pretty pathetic in 2021 and inexcusable. But overall, I definitely recommend seeing it. If you love these movies, you're not going to be disappointed. You know, you're there for the fights. The fights don't disappoint. You just got to take the rest of it with a grain of salt. And, you know, I just wish they would have got Michael Dougherty, who did King of Monsters, to direct this film, because I feel like he actually really appreciated the source material and just did such a good job with that movie. I think he just would have done such a better job than the director of this one currently did. But, you know, nothing we could do about it now. It was a lot of fun. Happy to talk about it. I don't typically talk about movies on this channel, but I'm just a big Godzilla fan. I love the movie, and I just wanted to talk about it and kind of give my thoughts. So let me know down below what you thought of the movie. Who do you think won? Do you agree with me that Godzilla was the clear winner between him and Kong? Do you agree with kind of my criticisms of the movie? Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I'll catch you all in the next one.